chances are, as a Browns fan or even a Vikings fan, you are likely to see an expansion franchise win the Super Bowl before your team. All right, Mike. We're now talking, it's Super Bowl week. You know, we can talk about the Chiefs. We can talk about the 49ers. They've been there before. They've won their Super Bowls before. Is this really the most interesting matchup? I'm going to say it's probably not, and quite frankly, it's kind of a snooze fest for me. I'm not that excited about the matchup, but, you know, I would have preferred to see many other teams. But the real important question that I have is, what team has won the Super Bowl yet that is the most, destructive to the franchise? What is the saddest team that is yet to win the Super Bowl?
I think it probably has got to be the Lions. I mean, they really haven't even been to the playoffs many times since the NFC and AFC. I mean, since the NFL and AFL, I should say, merged. The Lions have barely even been in the playoffs. Cleveland at least has a bunch of playoff heartbreak. I got to go Detroit on that one, Dirk.
All right, well, here's some other ones that you got to consider before you even go down that path.
Yeah.
Teams that haven't won the Super Bowl yet. Cincinnati.
Yep.
The Bills.
Yeah, 4 in a row. That's brutal.
And Jim Kelly, boy. Ooh.
Yeah.
Not only is the winter and the, weather in Buffalo cold and depressing, a February after you lose the Super Bowl for the 4th time in a row.
Yeah.
That's got to be rough.
Yeah, that was...
You also have the Purple People Eaters, who early on in the Super Bowl era went to so many Super Bowls but never pulled one off.
I don't believe the Vikings have ever led in a Super Bowl, Dirk. They went to 4, and I don't think they ever had the lead in a single game, which is pretty brutal. Not to mention, they had the famed Brett Favre game with the team that seemed like they were going to go to the Super Bowl, and he fed that up on a silver platter.
I don't know if he fed that up, or maybe the bounty gate happened.
Tracy Porter snatched that thing and took it. I don't know. I've got to say, still, living in football purgatory in gelatin, which is what it's been to be a Lions fan for the vast majority. I can't imagine, how do you even be a fan of a team that makes the playoffs and wins games twice in 50 years? It's crazy.
You know what's even more depressing?
Yeah.
It's what if you're one of those long-lasting legacy teams? Think about the Browns. Okay, I'm a Browns fan. You're one of those long-lasting legacy teams. You're the Bills. You're the Vikings. You've been to Super Bowls, or maybe you haven't even been to a Super Bowl. Who knows? However, chances are, as a Browns fan or even a Vikings fan, you are likely to see an expansion franchise win the Super Bowl before your team.
Yeah, that is true.
That's horrible. Houston has a better chance of winning the Super Bowl in the next 10 years than I think the Browns, or really even the Vikings.
That's where I was going to take this, Dirk. Which one of these teams do you see, or these franchises, break it first?
Well, I'll tell you right now. I would take, if there was just a 50-50 ratio, take either side. Would you take the Jaguars or the Texans before the Browns or the Vikings? I would.
Yeah,
I think the Jaguars will win the Super Bowl before you'll see the Browns or the Vikings win a Super Bowl.
I think there's a decent shot at that. But there are 2 other teams that you've left off. We talked about them previously. Buffalo and Cincinnati have gotten very close in recent years. Do you see one of those teams putting it together in the coming years?
Yeah, out of all of the teams that are some of your core teams that have been around for the longest amount of time, Cincinnati has the best chance, in my opinion, to actually turn their season around and make it to the Super Bowl. Quite frankly, Joe Burrow should have probably won a Super Bowl when they went just a few years ago. And they really let that one down. I think that team was built to win it, and it was kind of a surprise year too. However, I do think they're best positioned because, honestly, they have a pretty decent go of it with their cap space is, where contracts are, and just where that defense and offensive line is. I think that they have the best chance when you're comparing them to the Vikings, you're comparing them to the Bills, and you're comparing them to the Browns. Browns are in cap space hell.
Yeah.
The Bills, we've talked about so many times how their chance was this year, and the last chance was this year, unless Josh Allen coughs up all of his justified earnings, I guess you could say. And then Detroit,
they're on the fringes
on
here.
The fringe,
yeah.
But Detroit does Detroit things in NFC championships.
Well, here's one other one for you, Dirk. I think the Houston Texans, if they end up pulling someone like Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs in free agency, could be kind of scary.
Can you imagine that? If
Yeah.
they pulled like a great offensive tackle,
Yeah,
and then they pulled, Derrick Henry or Saquon,
yeah.
or even Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, exactly. The Texans might be a sleeper team to get it done first. Last word on this one, I will say, none of these teams have it quite as bad as Cubs and Red Sox fans did in the 90s when the Florida Marlins, in existence for like 4 years, went and won the World Series, and those teams had not won in decades upon decades. And somehow, someway, the Florida Marlins have 2 World Series. That is 2 more than the Colorado Rockies will ever see.